like this one a lot. Lessons that come easy are not lessons at all. They are gracious acts of luck, or as Christians, we might even define that a little bit differently. Yet lessons learned the hard way are lessons that are never forgotten. And we've had some of both of those in the last 2 years with Score Group schools, and we'd like to share some of those with you today. So thanks for joining us today as CACE Fellows, and we have a panel of school leaders who are going to share lessons learned in 4 areas. Board governance and team leadership is one area that we work on. A second area is financial planning, strategic financial planning. A third area is changes that have occurred in teaching and learning. And then the fourth area is marketing and enrollment practices. You might be wondering what a score group is. We actually stole this idea from the automotive industry, where there's groups of, they call them 20 groups. So we did an Abe Lincoln and changed 20 to score, and decided that we could bring together non-competing school leaders from across North America to see what kind of better practices. Notice we don't use the word best, we use the word better, because we need to be constantly looking for a better way to do leadership, innovative ways to do leadership. And so we're looking for better ways that we can become healthier in those 4 areas as a school. But I'd like to start with some introductions. Oh, I'm sorry. So a score group really then is getting together these school leaders 4 times over the course of 2 years, sharing better practices, and then holding each other accountable too. And the nice part is, and I hope the panelists will share some of their stories in terms of, it's like increasing the number of admin FTE that you have for your school. So typically that's something we would all love to have, right? Another administrator at our school that can do some of the work. This would be the best way we could do that, and it doesn't cost you any money. So you can add some FTE to your admin team with the CACE Fellows, as well as with the school leaders from across North America that are working for you, pulling for you, and encouraging you. Let's start with a few introductions. So I'm wondering if we could go in order in terms of, these are the panelists that we have for today. 2 from Valley Christian, 2 from Deer Creek, and Lori, I forgot, Mitch didn't tell me you were coming, but if you'd be willing to introduce yourself from Intermountain as well. So Mike, and the other thing I've asked them to say is one thing that they have appreciated about, the first thing that kind of comes to mind that they've appreciated about participating in a score group. So Mike, would you be willing to start?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Tim, and hi, everybody. My name is Michael Chen, and I'm the superintendent of Valley Christian Schools here in Dublin, California. That's a different Valley Christian school than the one that Eric is at. But in any case, I've been here since with the school for 1.5 years now, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of the score group. And be part of the CACE. And I think if I can say anything about this, the advantage and the benefit of being part of the CACE, and the school group is, I think this is what I see in most Christian schools around the country, is that we are so focused on what we do locally and regionally. And it's easy for us to have tunnel vision. And it's easy for us to be very provincial. Now, it may be that us as heads of schools, we have a broader and global point perspectives. But the thing is that a lot of folks in our own schools may not have that perspective, and they may feel like their struggle is really much more localized. So by bringing CACE to be part of what we do here locally, my staffs, my leaders, my teachers feel like they are part of something bigger. So I think that's a consistent sort of feedback that I get, is that they say, we didn't know that there are other Christian schools are doing all sorts of different things. We thought that Christian education is just this one little thing, and that there's only one little way to do it, when in fact it's just out there, the creativities and the courageous efforts that people are doing, so that we're part of something bigger. That is I think the biggest advantage of being part of CACE. So I'm just so pleased and appreciative and grateful for what the CACE is doing for our school.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Daly.
Hi, I am Daly Johnson. I'm the Director of Admission at Valley Christian, serving under Mike's leadership. And Mike shared a lot of what I was planning to share, so we probably should have talked ahead of time. But really the idea of not feeling isolated or alone. I think I started at the same time as Mike. I've been at Valley for 1.5 years and have been doing enrollment work before, but in higher education. And so I stepped into a role that was familiar, but still slightly foreign to me. And to be able to have other school leaders and peers and colleagues to bounce ideas off of and share best practices and kind of get out of, like Mike said, the bubble of what we've always been doing here and try to be innovative and have other resources of people that can tell us, hey, we tried that and it didn't work. Or, hey, we tried it and it didn't work for us, but it could for you and your demographic. And so for us to feel like we have a bigger team and other people to even just be a sounding board for us has been a huge resource, especially in the first 1.5 years in a new role.
Thanks, Daly. Appreciate that. Steve, I didn't know if Brian, I know he was going to sneak in a little late. If Brian, if you're there, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll go to Steve.
All right. My name is Brian Verwolf, like it says on the screen. And I came in to a relationship with CACE after their relationship with Deer Creek had already started. I started as the new head of school here. And so I'm a rookie principal, and I was able to ask Tim, our mentor, a lot of questions about how do you hire and fire, and how do you manage a front office staff and how they answer the phones and things like that all of us rookie principals have to figure out right away. So that's probably been the most significant way that I've benefited from CACE. But Steve's going to share a little bit more about big picture benefits. So,
thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Hello, all. My name is Steve Blum. I'm the Director of Development at Deer Creek, and this is a relatively new role for me as well. We, as a small Christian school on the far south side of Chicago, we're in a lot of need. And I called Tim up one day about something else, and we started discussing the relationship with CACE and what that could be for Deer Creek. And the big thing for us has been, I would say, hope. And that was a culture shift for us, because the common theme around the school was we are declining enrollment. The common discussions in the parking lot among parents was, is Deer Creek going to remain open next year? That was the end of year discussion year after year. The board had no direction going forward, and we had a string of less than great principals. So leadership was a big issue. And CACE came in and they asked a ton of questions, which we loved at the outset, because they wanted to learn who we were. It wasn't just, here's what you need to do and go with it. It was really learning about our context, how we do Christian education in our geographic area, and then brought us together with other schools. And there's obviously economies of scale involved, but a lot of the issues that, say, Mike was dealing with at Valley or Jake was dealing with in Philadelphia were our issues, just on different levels. And to be able to talk about those best practices and then go back and contextualize them with our mentor was an essential ingredient for us to really change the direction of this school. We felt like we made some really difficult decisions, but we also felt like those decisions were done in faith and obedience in many ways. And I think that God has allowed us to continue on in a very healthy direction. On the board leadership side, hiring Brian as a strong leader in an area where we needed to really get the word out about our school. So board governance, head of school leadership, defining those roles between board and head of school, marketing, and then improving our curriculum and communicating well with our parents. All things that CACE guided us through on all levels.
Thanks, Steve. Mitch from Intermountain, and then Lori, if you'd be willing to follow up Mitch.
So we were one of the first schools to work with CACE, and just knew, being in Salt Lake City, we needed a lot of outside input because we're pretty isolated out here, being one of only basically two K-12 Christian schools in the whole state, and the other one was hour and a half away. And so, excuse me, we started the relationship. There was challenges. It was pretty early in my tenure as head of school, and there were a lot of cultural things, strong points in a lot of areas in the school, but we were struggling budgetarily, enrollment-wise, just even mission statements, and so they had a plethora of things to help us through. And the one thing that I love the most about the relationship was having 5 people who knew us well. I know that might not be the model that y'all are going at right now, but I did feel like we could reach out to various people who knew us well, and we could go, hey, we got to check with, I'll let Tim know this right now. I'll be contacting him probably later today or tomorrow about another thing that they still know us well, and just want their feedback on something and their resources for us. And so as you go, hey, I'm sensing a problem here, or they said, we're sensing a problem here. How do you, or an opportunity or whatever, but how do you proceed with that? And you have this area, this group of experts to lean on. That's been the number one thing for me.
Thanks, Mitch. Lori, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I didn't give you any warning, so I apologize.
That's okay. I am the elementary and middle school principal, and I've been at ICS almost a year and a half. So CACE was already involved with ICS when I came here, and it's been really great. It's been, what all of you have said, just a great support system of people who do what we do and understand it, and great resource to people to reach out to. I've been to a couple of conferences or events, and that has been really helpful as well, just to meet people and have those conversations and build those relationships. So thanks for all you do. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Lori. One of the things that we're working on right now is really trying to develop workable models in these 4 areas. We have some folks working on a Healthy Schools app right now. And we've been very fortunate that the schools that we've been working with have allowed us to tinker a little bit and to use them in some ways as sandboxes, right? To try some things out in, hopefully in safe ways. So I've asked the following people just to talk a little bit about changes that they've done in the areas of those four areas. So we'll start with board governance and team leadership. And Mitch, if you'd be willing to kick us off here, and Steve, but please, other panelists, feel free to jump in as well.
All right. Yeah, when we started with CACE, we were at a situation where I was the new head of school about 6 months earlier, and we had a very supportive school board, still do. I actually still enjoy going to school board meetings, which I think probably 90% of administrators don't feel that way. I'll just keep telling myself that. But they're really supportive, but I'm not sure they completely understood their roles. And so that was something that CACE helped us out with, just even in helping those discussions with the board, in order to say, hey, I'll never forget Chad Dirksey sitting with them one night and saying, do you understand your fiduciary responsibility? And if you know Chad, that can be kind of an interesting conversation there. But so that was really, really important. And then the team leadership, we also went through a lot of transition there, and the whole school has gone through a ton of transition here. And I don't know how I would have done it. CACE was truly a gift from God on that. But to understand the importance of alignment, and really we spent, as a lot of you know, and Dan, I think of you in this framework, but a ton of time working on a new mission statement. It took us about 7 months to come up with 17 words, and the importance of really driving behind that and allowing that then to have everything else flow out from that. And we're still doing that. Obviously, you continue to do that all the time, but CACE really helped us with those transitions. and those of you who know me well know that it's not shocking that I've forgotten my last thought that I had here, but I did have another one. But yeah, team leadership governance. I think it was really helping us get aligned, helping identify, hey, you're not going to solve the whole thing all at once, but to say, here's the steps that you're gonna that I think we should address first, and then having Eric was my coach, and having him have those every other week phone calls with me to go, how you doing on this? Where are you at on this? How about this? Here's my feedback on this one. I need that accountability, and that was enormous for me. So that's it for now.
Thanks, Mitch. Steve?
Leadership is probably the most significant shift we have made as a school, in that the school was started 25 years ago as something else, governed by a church, and we were now independent but still functioning under an old model. We were asked, what is the board's role? And that question had never been asked. And because we had such a long history of poor leadership in the school, the board assumed the role of management. I first got involved with Deer Creek as a parent, then was a board member, and we would have 5-hour board meetings, and I'm not exaggerating one bit. We would get to the end of those meetings, and I would say, I don't know what we did tonight. And so we had to just start asking the question, what is the board's role in this? And in order to do that well, you have to trust the person that is leading the school. So I stepped in an interim role as principal for a year, but my main goal was finding the next head of school. And we did that. And in finding Brian, it allowed us to really focus on the board's job, those 4 key responsibilities of good standing: fiduciary responsibility, overseeing the head of school's work, and then looking 3 to 5 years out. And Tim came on site on 3 different occasions, spent time with our board, and that was so incredibly valuable for us because it wasn't internal. It wasn't us asking ourselves. It was somebody from the outside who knew what healthy schools looked like that were able to allow us to discuss as a team what that looked like. I'm happy to say we had our shortest board meeting ever last month, and felt like it was the most accomplished during that time. And I think we're just in a much healthier place in how we communicate, identifying what the board's role is, and keeping the board in that sphere, allowing us to look a long ways out. The other side of it is Tim met a person at a conference, called me up and said, you have to meet this person. I called her up, and she was an administrator for many years of very healthy schools, and we got her on the board. So just that networking side of things was vital. If we didn't have that person come on our board, I don't know where we would be today. But it was a connection Tim made with us. So much healthier and still getting healthier at this point.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. If at this point too, Eric is monitoring the chat room. So if you have any specific questions for the panelists, you're welcome to put those in the chat room, and Eric will jump in and ask those on your behalf. The second area of school health that we focus on is the idea of strategic financial planning, or the idea of how can we help your school become sustainable. I've asked Michael Chen to talk about this because I think he can tell you his story, which is a good one. And Michael, feel free to talk about the partnerships outside of CACE that you've engaged with as well.
Absolutely. I want to start out by saying a couple of things. One is, as you can see just from how Mitch described his school and how Steve and Brian and all that, there's this sense that we can come here and feel safe. We're not here to paint this rosy picture of our own schools, but rather we're here to be very honest. But it's not a griping session and it's not a complaining session, but rather we're here to move from problem space to solution space. And I think this is just one of the most valuable benefits. So as I'm talking, I'm going to be talking about some really pressing problems that we as a school face. And the reason why I can talk talk about that openly in this group is because that's the culture that under Tim's leadership is developing, and that we can come together as a group of people who really want to do this well. And kind of piggyback on board governance and team leadership. I mean, that you start out, again, when I first came in, I asked a financial question. I asked the question and say, does anybody know how much it costs to educate one student in our school? And nobody can give me an answer. And immediately, what I saw was that my board wasn't doing its job, or didn't understand its responsibilities, because they never look at that issue. And our school is a church school, so it has a tremendous complexity. You got a board of deacons that really has ultimate power, authority on the financial end, and then you had a school board that the aims and the purpose for them, that they understood for themselves is pretty ambiguous. Their advisory board, their governing board, it's very unclear. So my first half year was to bring some education to the board, but immediately that what we saw was the financial aspect of our school was a complete mess. I recognized that there was some problem there. And with the case, with Eric's suggestions, and also CACE have a sponsor in terms of financial resource, we were able to get one of the best in the country, the kind of a school finance person, Chuck Evans. And Chuck Evans came out here and he basically looked at our financial problem within one afternoon, because I talked to him on the phone and I shared with him about all the things that I'm seeing and the problems. He kind of thought, it can't be that bad. He didn't really trust me. And then he came up on campus and he said, well, okay, now I can see what's going on. Of all the places I work on, every school has that one major challenge. Mike, you got them all. You got all of them. I thought, okay, great. And I thought, well, okay, well, let's take a deep breath and figure this out. And one of the biggest things that we had to do was to really begin to brainstorm and analyze from one aspect to another aspect, whether it is from the issue of tuition. Such, is it a cost-based tuition where we're at? In terms of tuition discounts. Do you know that we have 28 discount programs? The first year when I got here, 28. We have absolutely no way to track them. There's no way to get a control of how to predict revenues. I'm it's incredibly crazy. There's no strategic reserve. We have cash management problems and all that stuff, cash problems, and debt issues and balancing budget issues and all that stuff. And then our accounting office was a mess, so we had to let go of a couple people. We cycled through 3 leaders. I finally hired a really strong accounting person to be able to help me identify the problem, and we were able to track the problem back for 15 years. The problems start out at least 15 years ago, and we're really at the tail end of it in terms of where the system can naturally be resilient enough to handle the problem. So we're putting some measures in place to help our school to get to a better place. But I want to say that, if it weren't for CACE, the resource that CACE provide for us, or for Eric to constantly to be my sounding boards and help me look at some of my financial memos and budgets and all that stuff. I mean, this would have been a very challenging year and a half, but we're still standing, and because of some of the work that we do, I think our leaders are excited. They're ready to move forward to the next level.
Thank you, Michael. Mitch or Steve, would you like to comment on this one, or are you?
All right, I was just writing a message in the chat room saying Tim didn't ask me to talk on this, but I definitely could. We were in and still, are in a way really challenging. Last year was the 7th out of 8 years running of deficits at ICS, and spending next year's dollars and then starting to literally run out. And a lot of great things were happening, but last year, about 13 months ago, was when Chad Dirks was out here. And I had probably put too much trust in, it's not the business manager's fault, but I wasn't looking at the right things. And we realized we have a significant cash flow problem that could actually come to a really brutal head about 9 months ago. And Chad helped us work through the realities of that, the current situation, and then coming up with a plan going forward. And just the budgeting practices, and we changed our budgeting practices completely. We educated the board on that process, and it was really due to that we went into this year with a budget that was it was set a lot more reasonably, and fortunately, by God's grace and that planning. If everything still goes according to like we think it's going to the rest of the year, we will be in the black quite a ways with actually starting to build up those reserves that Michael talked about due to a strategic plan that we're working on. And it's just been a huge turnaround here on some of those very basic health issues. And really, I don't know how I would have survived that one if it would have been for last November, December, January. Visit with Chad and so that's it.
Yeah, and I would say everything that Mitch just said is true for us. We were hemorrhaging money. Enrollment was going down. It was which lever do you pull? Borrowing money year over year from each other or from the next year, and we sat down probably a year and a half ago and said, obviously this can't quit, but here are things we need to increase enrollment. We need to spend some money to do that with marketing, how we communicate, all that. So we saw enrollment going up. At the end of last year, we put together a 2-year, I considered us viable at the end of last year. This year's, or the 17-18 budget that we're proposing in January, I think if we hit our marks, our targets that we've established for ourselves, that we will have that 5 to 10% savings that we need. And then we will truly be at a point of sustainability. A part of that is fundraising, but I would say a more significant part of that is learning how to establish a mission-focused budget and keep that accountable. And that's exciting. We're in an exciting time if we're able to do that.
Thanks, Steve. And nicely to the next section, which is marketing and enrollment management. I've asked Daly Johnson if she'd speak on that. This is her world out in Valley. So Daly.
Yeah, Mike mentioned that we very quickly identified quite a few problems, more than I think we were hoping to find when we got here. And as we kind of dug through a lot of it, one of the biggest areas where those problems were stemming from was our retention. We had a very unhealthy re-enrollment process. The school had kind of for years tried whatever they were hearing was what other schools were doing, but weren't really considering necessarily if that was what worked for our demographic of students. And we were not only hemorrhaging money, we were hemorrhaging students. We were losing students by the busload each year. And no one had really identified where that was coming from or why that was happening. So even though we were bringing in new students each year, we were still decreasing in enrollment. And through our time with CACE, one of the things that we realized is one of the biggest hearts behind why our retention was so low was we had an incredibly broken communication structure on campus, a communication structure that we kind of blamed on bad marketing in the past, but was bigger than that. And broken communication across campus, broken communication with our parents, broken communication with our community. So there was a lot of misperception about who we were and what was happening on campus, and not a lot of knowledge about the really cool things that students were doing and that God was doing on our campus. And so through Mike and our time with CACE back in February, we came home and restructured our whole communication structure. And I took our communication efforts under the umbrella of enrollment. And it's made some really big changes across campus, even in just how we are entering into this re-enrollment season, how our families are trusting administration more. There's a lot more stability this year and a lot more trust that's built in. And so on the re-enrollment, the retention side, that was a huge shift for us. Now, we're praying that we see those changes in what we can report as retention numbers for next year. But what we're feeling is definitely very different from those changes that we made from this time last year. A lot less fear on campus, a lot less of what Steve mentioned, those parking lot conversations, a lot less of that this year, which is a huge step. And for those of you that spent time with us in February, you know that that's a really big step for us since then. On the new student enrollment side, we made some other pretty big changes, and I've talked a lot about this with Tim. We kind of moved away from this model of, like I said, doing what every other school in this area was doing. So we felt like we needed to, and that in this area was continuous re-enrollment as far as retention goes. And on the new admission side, everything is really driven by really large events. Campus visits are incredibly limited, and so the only time for families to come to a campus is through a large scale open house and big events, and everyone has on their best face, and that for years is what we did, and it didn't work. We didn't have families show up, and if they did, they weren't the families that applied, and if they did apply, they weren't the families that enrolled. And so when we looked at the data from those events, we were putting a lot of time and money and effort into areas that weren't helping us. And so after conversations with CACE and Mike and I canceled all open houses after one open house last year. And what we moved towards was a model of all private family visits. Now, it was a huge undertaking because that means that, we have a 2-person admission staff, and we are offering private visits at any time that families want to versus coming for large events, which some weeks has meant we have 20 families on campus between the two of us, but it's worked really well. We've built relationships with families. It's a model that reflects who we are and what we value as a school. It was a big leap of faith because it was a big change, and there were a lot of people in our community that didn't really agree with that because it wasn't what we had done all the time. I would frequently come into my office, and on my desk would be flyers for other schools' open houses with an anonymous little post-it. Why aren't we doing this? Do you see what other schools are doing? So that was hard in a first year on the role to feel like I was really doubted, but to have the support of CACE and kind of reminding ourselves that we needed to really look at our demographic and the demographic of students that we're trying to get to engage with our community. It's been encouraging to see how that's worked so far.
Thanks, Daly. And we have asked Daly if she'd be willing to do a webinar for us on some of the practices, the best practices or better practices that they've engaged in. So I figure if I ask her again publicly, that it's going to hurt her to say no. So
I would love to.
Awesome. Our last, and if you think about the first 3 areas of healthy schools, in some ways, those aren't the reasons why we exist, right? We exist for number 4, to be places where we can teach and learn and discover and unfold God's creation. But those top 3 have to be in place and working well for us to get to number 4. So we're very excited. Dan Barentz is an expert in this area. We've recently contracted with Stephen Levy, who's a EL school designer, to help us in this area too. So we're really excited that when we get those top 3 in tip-top shape, then we could really zero in and hit number 4. But there is some outstanding things going on in our CACE schools too in the area of teaching and learning. So I've asked Brian Verwolf and Michael Chen to share some of the innovative things that they're doing right now.
Thanks, Tim. So, Daley, when you said that Valley was losing students by the busload, I started thinking, if that happened at Deer Creek, we'd be in a world of hurt because we have 120 students. But something significant at our school happened because these first three points of healthy schools have kind of been coming into place over the last 2 years. And so we were able to kind of take some risks in some other areas. And so this past summer, we actually moved our location about 12 minutes away from where we were for 25 years previous. And so we had a pretty awesome opportunity to kind of set the tone, or a blank canvas for setting the tone for a new culture that we wanted to create within Deer Creek. And so since we started feeling a little bit more confident about our strategic plan and how the governance model was operating, we were able to kind of set up classrooms in a way that would propel us into what we wanted to do in setting culture within our school. So we do a lot with flexible seating, something that we would not have considered 2 years ago in the location that we were at. And we've come into this new location with kind of a mindset of, well, let's try it out because we have a long time ahead of us in this spot, and we can take a few risks here. So we've been able to do that with our new location. And something else that we focused on a lot this year is, and it was recommended by Tim that we explore this model last year, is the positive behavior interventions model with how we deal with discipline and being proactive with our students and teachers with how we handle relationships with students. And so that's kind of taking off now in our new location, and we're not moving really fast with that, but that's kind of helped us set the tone for what we do here at Deer Creek as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Lori, would you be willing to jump in after Michael talks? We'll see if Lori's still around. Michael, go ahead.
Oh,
I said sure. I think I was muted.
Oh, thanks, Lori.
Okay, my turn, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I do want to say that, I mean, just this whole idea, well, first of all, I want to start with our school's mission. Our school's mission, and this is something also part of the board's governance education, is that when I first came, no one knew what the school's mission was. I asked around and said, hey, can you tell me what the school's mission was? And no one can recite it. And that means there's some problem. And so the board worked very hard during my first half year here. Went through a process and developed a school's mission. As that we're here to develop courageous, creative, and thoughtful leaders to excellent interdisciplinary, holistic, and rigorous Christian education. Now, out of that mission statement, the concept of interdisciplinary education really become a major highlight. But what we discovered is that people had different concepts and ideas on what that means. And so I knew that there needs to be some education, both on the teacher's part and also on the leadership part. And so with CACE sponsored and suggestions, Dan Barron came out, in fact, a couple of times. One time working with all my K-12 teachers all at once, and another time during the summer working with my leadership team. And with teachers, Dan was particularly wonderful in connecting with us teachers in the sense that he really identified the aim of education and articulated that for our teachers, which is about human flourishing. And human flourishing, we human beings, we're not we're not segmented in the way we operate. We're holistic human beings, and and we had to be able to begin to think about that and think about education in that way. So that is a professional development that many teachers are still talking about today, and continue to refer back to that session, that whole day session with Dan. And that sets up a really great foundation for our leadership to begin to brainstorm and say, moving forward, how can we really develop a program, K to 12, sort of a holistic approach that really become the distinctives that will be in alignment with our mission. And I must say that this past month, 1 month, has been pretty exciting because my deans and directors really came up with this new approach to at least K to 12 approach, where every single grade level has this unique experiential learning experience that will be the sort of a theme and umbrella for all these other subjects within that grade levels. And this is kind of remind me of this of what Steve Livy and Dan is doing, the kind of expeditionary learning and experiential learning and all that. Our school is not quite there yet in terms of the basic understanding and education on the experiential learning, but that's a direction that I can see that we can be moving forward. But I think that's going to be, we're ready to roll out at least the preliminary plans for our families as an added value add for next year, and I think that's going to get our families excited.
Thanks, Michael. Lori, could you talk about some of the practices that you guys are engaged in at the elementary at Intermountain?
Yes. We just finished last week our re-accreditation process, which we did with Advanced Ed this time. And one thing that was really identified there that it was very confirming, because we also had identified it in our strategic plan, was just curriculum alignment. It's something that, was done 5 years ago during the accreditation process, but then kind of put on a shelf and left there. And as over the last 5 years, as we've really changed and reworked our mission and vision and core values, we recognize that we want to look at that again and make realignments and make adjustments there. So that's one thing that we really want to focus on this spring, is looking at curriculum alignment and also biblical integration as part of that. So that's something that's really high on our radar as far as teaching and learning. I think that's something that can bring us, we're really solid academically, but with a few adjustments there, I think it can really bring us to that next level.
Thank you very much. It's going to be some exciting times in the next couple of years because of the possible Trump and DeVos educational leadership within our country. So we want to be ready as an organization, and we know that takes partners. So we don't see CACE as by any means a one-stop shop. You've heard a lot of the partners that we have already with Chuck Evans. We work with ISM with some of their board leadership stuff. We encourage head of schools to attend the Van Lunen program. Mitch has done that. Brian's going to start that in the coming year. We partner with an organization out of the Prairie Center for Christian Education called Teaching for Transformation, which gets at some of the internal teaching and biblical integration that Lori was just talking about. So we're pretty excited about what's happening with CACE and what's coming forward in the next couple of years too. We encourage you to be a part of it. We encourage you to share your best practices with us. We use our website mostly to push those things out, but we are going to be present at some conferences. We'll be at the Global Christian School Leadership Conference in Orlando in a couple weeks. We'd love to see you there, so stop by and visit. The SCORE group is actually an opportunity we get together for 2 days and we focus in on one of these areas, board governance, financial planning. There's a little homework that's done ahead of time. For example, the one we're tagging on to the end of the Global Christian School Leadership Conference in Orlando. So we'll ask schools to bring along their organization chart, their board policy manuals. Dan Behrens does some work with core clarity, so they take their 5 strengths from Strength Finders and Dan does some work with their leadership team on that. That encapsulates a little bit of what a SCORE group event is. And hopefully as you heard from some of our current SCORE group leaders, these are pretty powerful events that have sticky fingers that extend beyond their schools into other schools. However, these are all school leaders, and I know they always like the last word. So I'm going to give them each one more chance to share some encouragement. I'm going to keep it to about 30 seconds, and then I think Merica's just going to mute you. So we'll go in this order, if that's okay. Mitch, Steve, Brian, Daly, Michael, and Lori, you get the last word, okay? Go ahead, Mitch.
The value of the Strengths Finders things that we did, we actually changed leadership structure based on stuff that Dan came up with on that. So that was huge and really valuable. So thanks. That's it.
My encouragement is utilize all of CACE's resources, ask as many questions as possible, listen to each other, not just the fellows, but listen to one another and their stories, and utilize those relationships as well. Go to the events. The food is incredible.
I would second what Steve just said. Don't be afraid to ask any questions, even if you think they're a little silly. That's been significant for my growth and helping Deer Creek as well. Yeah.
I think I would just say, to echo all of that, just trust the people that you're around, trust the fellows, trust the other school leaders, and be willing to be open to ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about before or in the past thought wouldn't work.
I want to say this, what I share with my teachers and leadership, and I want to share it again, is C.S. Lewis' words from about Abolition of Man. The chief task of modern educators is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts. And I think that lesson, that encouragement applies to all of us as school leaders. Is that the CACE and the coaches, they're not here to help us cut down jungles and the complexity of our problems, but really to irrigate deserts in the areas that has not been flourishing, and that we are working together to make those places flourish. So as a whole, as a Christian education movement, we can make an impact. So thanks, CACE.
Well, it's hard to follow C.S. Lewis there, but I would say I think my last word of advice would be that it's a battle. It's a spiritual battle that we're in, and so to remember that and to remind yourself regularly of what you are called to personally and as a school, and to keep that before you and your staff, and to encourage each other, because it's hard out there day to day. So encourage each other, pray for each other. That would be my 2 cents.
Thank you, Lori. And thank you for all the panelists who participated. Thank you as an attendee too for logging in this morning. Jody Rosenbaum is our administrative assistant for CACE. She'll be sending out next semester's webinars, and it's a great list. Eric, you want to give a little teaser on who we have on the docket for next semester?
Yeah, we got some interesting stuff, and would encourage people to join us, especially in January. We got Beth Green's going to give us an update on Cardis 2016. I know she's been going around, but we're going to focus a little bit on specifically what the data from the last few studies, and especially this one with Canada, the focus on us, and on us as Christian schools in general, and what we're starting to see. Dr. Michael Lindsay is going to talk about some of his updated leadership information and how he's integrated it into his college program and the Presidential Leadership Fellows program at Gordon College, and how it might kind of transition down to schools and what they can think of. And we got Dan Behrens is going to do a series for us. We haven't titled it yet, but Dan's working on a series in regards to student learning at all levels, and in particular updating student learning for students with learning needs. and where we're at as Christian schools, what we can learn, and how we can, how we can not only improve overall practice, but practice for our students who have accommodations or have specific needs. And then we also have a new one by Justin Jones Fosu. He's a speaker for Fortune 500 companies. He speaks all over the country. He's doing a 4-part series on diversity and what that means for Christians, what that means for the Christian community, and what that means for us as Christian schools. And so we're blessed to have him. And then lastly, we're working with David Kinnaman to give us an update on the Barna research, and asked him to kind of take a look at that because he's focused on churches, but what that means in particular for us as Christian schools as we try to build local churches and the church as a whole.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eric. Again, thanks for your attendance today. Thanks for logging.